What happens when an elderly woman prepares the perfect Christmas dinner, only for her family to secretly gather without her? You won't believe how she turned that betrayal into a moment that still haunts them. So tell me, what's wrong with having a nice dinner for your own family one day a year? I'm not talking about warm up the pizza, sit around the TV. I'm talking about a real Christmas dinner, with silverware, candles, stuffed turkey, hot apple cider, and Christmas songs in the background. Yes, I, Marlene, a 71-year-old widow with 2 new knees and 1 old heartache, have decided that this year I will not be the same grandmother remembered only by a greeting card from the insurance company. I sold my ruby bracelet, a gift from the late John, my husband, who in his lifetime knew how to throw a party, and rented a beautiful mansion in the center of the county. There was a huge table for 20, a fireplace with a live fire, and even live music, a string trio from the local conservatory. I'd ordered catering from the same chef who cooks for the mayor at Christmas, and I'd thought of every detail, from name cards to heated chair seats. All so that my kids Thomas, Judy, and Eric would remember, if only for one evening, that family is not a happy holidays. Chat room. They confirmed their participation. Of course, without enthusiasm. Okay, Mom, send me the address. I'll try to be there if I'm not late for the office. Are you sure you want to bother? But like a fool, I was happy even with the dry responses. It seemed like this was the year I would beg for their attention. December 24th came. I arrived at the mansion before everyone else at 10 a.m. so I could check everything out. It was perfect. I arranged the name cards myself, made sure every plate was sparkling. The gifts, neatly wrapped in green paper with gold ribbons, were on the chairs. At 5 p.m., I was already sitting by the window in my best dress. I even twisted my hair, can you imagine? 71 and I'm twirling my curls in front of my kids like I did in college before a first date. 1800 hours. Not a soul. Probably traffic, I said to myself and took a sip of wine. 6:30 p.m. Judy texted. Silence. Called Eric, voicemail. Thomas didn't see fit to answer at all. 7:10 p.m. I moved to the fireplace. The floorboards creaked, candles melted, nerves creaked. And then at almost 9 p.m., I see my phone flash a notification. Family chat. Photo. All 3 of us. At a huge table. Somewhere in a cozy restaurant side by side. With captions along the lines of, Merry Christmas. Thought we'd grab a bite to eat here for a stress-free meal. I exhaled. Slowly gathered the cards. Wrapped the presents back up. Asked the staff to wrap everything. And in the cab I didn't cry anymore. I just looked at that picture. Those faces. My kids. My family. They didn't even bother to lie. I woke up the next morning feeling like someone had placed a stool inside of me and was standing up to lecture me on how I had been used. And you know that someone was me. Because when you put your heart into something that your family doesn't even think you should ignore with dignity for the 3rd time in a row, you don't need an enemy. You're your own director and victim. I opened my phone to a text from Judy. Mom, don't be mad, we just decided to simplify things a bit. Everyone's tired. From Eric. We thought it would be awkward. No offense. Thomas sent a meme. A meme, Carl. When Mom calls for family dinner again. And you know what, I laughed. Yeah, I laughed out loud. Because that's not even an insult, that's a diagnosis. I didn't answer. Not because I'm proud. But because I'm tired of being the one who always stokes the relationship fire where the rest of us only bring wet towels. My neighbor Sarah came over with a pie when she heard about the failure. I saw them at Bay and Cedar, she said cautiously. They were sitting there laughing. One of the waiters recognized Judy, she's on the county council now. Oh, I'm sure she was in her element, I said. Especially when she pretends she never had a mother who taught her how to carve a turkey. We drank tea. I was telling her how, as recently as last year, I made a buffet for my grandchildren for Christmas and they said, Grandma, we're vegans. Even though a month ago they were eating burgers in my kitchen. At some point I realized I wasn't just forgotten. I was canceled. Like an old subscription. First you use it, then you turn it off because it's no longer relevant. I didn't cry. But that night I pulled out the jewelry box I was saving for a special occasion and set aside the pearl earrings. A keepsake, I told myself. And there was so much poison in that keepsake that if the box had been alive, it would have run away on its own. I began to make a list. Who and what no longer belonged. My energy isn't for people who only remember I exist when they need college money for the kids. So I'm sitting by the window drinking iced tea with honey and thinking, maybe I'm really bothering them? And then I catch myself thinking, fuck them. Because it's not the person who calls you to the table who's in the way. It's the person who doesn't care. And yes, I know some people will say, well, maybe they had their reasons. Maybe they were really embarrassed. You know what else is embarrassing? Looking into the eyes of the woman who gave you everything, from the last sandwich as a child to the last ruby from your bracelet, and saying, we've decided it's somehow easier without you. I stopped checking family chat. Why would you do that? All there now anyway are pictures of grandchildren I don't see, and congratulations to each other, without me of course. Even Thomas's dog was wished a happy birthday, and only Judy threw a happy birthday to me on mine in the general thread. But you know what's interesting? When the letter from the lawyer arrived on the third day after Christmas, just a reminder to update my will, it was the first time I didn't ignore it. Usually I thought, well, that's for later. Let it stay that way for now. But this was the first time I thought, why would anyone who thinks you're an app that should have been deleted a long time ago want to know? I put on my coat, closed the door behind me and went to the bank. Not for money, no. I went just because I wanted to feel like I was still in control of something in my life. I stopped by the church at the same time. The candle burned out halfway, and so did my tolerance for those nice traders in expensive suits. Coming out of the temple, I met Loretta, the woman from the orphanage that John and I had supported in our time together. She recognized me at first sight. Mrs. Mason? Is that you? Her voice trembled. I am. Alive, strangely enough. I remember you bringing me a pie for Christmas when no one else called me. That's a real memory. Not a family chat meme, but a piece of pie that stays in your heart. So I thought maybe this year I'll give pies to those who won't forget who baked them. I came home and pulled out the guest list for Christmas dinner. I slowly crossed off each one and wrote new ones. Martha from the post office, who's always out of lunch. Dawn from the drugstore, who makes better old age jokes than any comedian, and Loretta. They wouldn't be late. I stood up and looked out the window, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't look for their car headlights in the dark. I don't need them to come anymore. I don't need to walk away from myself anymore. What happened next changed everything. Subscribe and stay, you don't want to miss how it unfolded. After that ghost dinner, I wasn't expecting a miracle. I was waiting for a phone call. At least something like, we overreacted, Mom. Or at the very least, I'm sorry it wasn't nice. But no. Digital silence. The phone didn't ring, and if it did, it was only from mailing lists with offers to give blood, donate money, or sign up for a new keto diet course. Oh yes, the keto diet is what people care about now, not respect for mothers, not shame, not gratitude. Just ketosis, energy without carbs, and pretty pictures in front of filters. I did what many women my age do when they are offended and don't know where to put that offense. I went into the kitchen and started scrubbing the stove. Not because it was dirty, because at least somewhere I wanted to clean up. At least somewhere I wanted the effort to have an effect. Because in my relationship with my kids, I've been laboring in vain. You scrub, you scrub, you scrub, you still get the smell. On the third day I went to the store. The old trusted Publix where everyone knows I like sharp cheddar and fresh pomegranates. The young cashier with a faded tattoo on his neck didn't even look at me. He punched my purchases, muttering "have a good one" under his breath like I was the wind. Or maybe I am the wind. Nobody notices me. Not at home, not at the checkout. I bought a pie. One. A small one for one. Because I wasn't going to bake for anyone who didn't even remember to say thank you. You know, like in that movie. There's nothing sadder than a hot pie cooled without a kiss. Now imagine I have 3 of these. My neighbor Sarah stopped by tonight again with pie, this time pumpkin pie. We sat down and talked about life. You didn't call them? She asked, picking at the filling with a spoon. Why would I? So they'd lie about how they were still digesting the stress of the holidays? Or for Judy to drop out again. Mom, we're a family, why are you making such a big deal out of this? No, Sarah. Let them be quiet. That's what they're good at, by the way. The next day the mailman Dave left a card under my door. Sloppily signed, The Masons. No names. No words. As if someone had taken it and scattered the respect in the mailboxes, just on a whim. I put it in the billfold, because that's how it felt, like a debt notice with no coverage. And then the climax. I got a call from the nursing home where I used to volunteer. They asked if I wanted to come again just to read a book to someone. You used to be able to talk in a way that made people cry and laugh, remember? They said. And it was the first time in a month that someone called me, not because I have to, but because I am me. Alive. Whole. And someone cares. I said yes. Without a second thought. Because it's better to talk to old people you don't know than to keep quiet with your own kids. I went there on Friday. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and candy. On the walls hung trimmed Christmas garlands, which someone had obviously made with a soul, but without an eye for detail. I was escorted to a restroom where 3 old people sat, 2 in chairs, 1 in a wheelchair. When I walked in, no one looked up. I sat quietly in a corner and began to read aloud. When winter came, the forest was covered with silver. And after a few minutes, one of the women, Mrs. Harvey, I was told later, suddenly looked up and whispered, "You've come again." And so that whisper did more for me than all the digital loves from my family over the last 10 years. I went there 3 times a week. We read, chatted, told jokes. I brought them homemade cookies. They called me, our Marilyn with the radio voice. Me? Radio? I forgot I had a voice until they heard it. And then one day I was coming home, and I saw Eric on my doorstep. He was standing there like a schoolboy about to be reprimanded, a box in his hand. "Mom," he began. "I know we've been acting kind of, well, wrong. Judy and Thomas and I. We just didn't want drama." "You know what's weird?" I said. "There was no drama. It started when you decided I didn't even deserve a fake thank you." He held out a box. It contained my brooches, the ones I gave Judy last year as a keepsake. "We thought you should have them." "Well," I said, "it's good to see someone's memory is working." He's gone. No tea party. No hug. But maybe for the first time with a thought. And I realized I don't need any more signs of love. I need someone not to wipe their feet on my kindness. They invited me to stay for dinner. I declined. Not because the food was bad, it was just that night I wanted to eat alone for the first time in a long time. With myself. Without expectations, without awkward conversations, without the feeling that every word could be ridiculed later in the family chat room under the next funny meme. I came home, pulled out my old set that I hadn't used since my anniversary with John, and set the table. Yeah, for one. So, I'm still a woman who knows how to throw a dinner party with class. Even if it's just a cat and a warm lamp at the table. The next day I got an email from Thomas. Not an email. A real letter, with a stamp and handwriting I'd recognize among 1,000. Inside was a piece of paper with only 3 lines on it. "You were right. We were mean. We don't apologize. Just sorry we realized it so late." I didn't cry. I smiled. Because if anyone should have learned a lesson from this, it wasn't me. I passed my patience test a long time ago. Now it was their turn. I put the letter in the box where I used to keep my Mother's Day cards. It's empty now. Because those cards were fake. This one is real. Even if it's bitter. Then Sarah came in. "How are you, dearie?" she asked, sitting down with the cake. "Better than when I was waiting for them. They'll show up again. Maybe. But I'm not the same person they left in that mansion with the frozen candles." And then I realized I'm not alone. I'm just finally alone with myself. And that's a huge difference. In the kitchen, I opened the box of Christmas toys. The same ones I'd hung on the tree for decades with my children, then my grandchildren. Each toy had its own why. This bell is from Santa Fe, where we went on our honeymoon. This wooden horse, Thomas broke it when he was 6 and then glued it upside down himself. This angel, Judy gave it to him when she went to 1st grade. I was sitting there looking at them, and I thought, if they only knew how easily the important things are forgotten, how quickly the warmth of the heart is squeezed out if you don't feed it. But I didn't throw them away. I just put the toys in another box, the one that now holds things that were important back then. Not to them now, but still to me. That night I went to the nursing home again. And there was a Christmas tree there too. Modest, unassuming, with one garland that blinked like a tired eye. I brought my own toys, and we hung them together. The old men, the nannies, even that sullen guard who always seemed stony-faced to me. He suddenly asked, "Is this your family?" I nodded. In a way, now it was. Then I put on some music. And we sang Christmas songs. No auto-tune, no filters, no outfits. But with real feeling. And at some point I realized I might not get back the family I fought for. But damn it, I'm gonna build the one they didn't even bother to try to create. By the time I got home, the snow had started to fall. Slowly, as if testing to see if I deserved this white silence. And I just stood by the porch and looked up. No thoughts, no pretenses. For the first time in a long time I was just calm. I wasn't asking to be loved anymore. I was me. And you know, that's no small thing. I went into the house, took off my coat and hung it on the hook. Not because someone might come in and see the mess. It was because I damn well deserved to live in order. Not ostentatious, not for the sake of guests. For me. For the same Marlene who spent her whole life trying to be a good mom. And who finally became a good one to herself. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Subscribe now to see the hero put everyone in their place. Spring came unexpectedly. Not by calendar but by smell. I stepped out onto the porch in my bathrobe with a cup of coffee. And for the first time in a long time my chest wasn't pounding. Who's going to write to me? No one. And it was no longer an excuse for pain, it had become freedom. The scent of lilacs, the morning sun and the voice in my head. You're living, Marlene. You're not surviving. You're living. I didn't make a show of it. I didn't call my kids and yell into the phone. How could you? That would have been too convenient for them. I chose silence. But not the kind you hide in. But the kind where you hear yourself. And it was a sound I'd long been used to but for the first time embraced. I started writing. Not memoirs. Stories. Scenes. Phrases. Little bits of truth wrapped in fiction. None of the heroes were named, but everyone would recognize themselves. Especially those who were always too busy to read any of my notes on the refrigerator. And then one day I got a call from the local library. Turns out one of the nursing home nurses had given them my stories. And they read them, you know. And they didn't just read them, they invited me to a meeting of the authors. We'd like you to do a reading. A reading? The last time I spoke in front of people was when I was leading a parent-teacher conference, and I was yelled at, "Why can't your son wear a tie?" But I said yes. And here I am, wearing a new sweatshirt that I didn't buy on sale but because I like it. In front of the audience. Grown men. Some with gray hair, some with their daughter on their laps. And I'm reading. And in that moment I realized, it doesn't matter who didn't come. It matters who stayed. When I finished reading there was silence in the room. Not because it was boring. It was because people were listening. Not interrupting. They weren't looking at their phones. They heard me for the first time in a very, very long time. A woman came up to me after the show. Your story about that woman and the empty holiday table. That's you, isn't it? That's all of us, I replied. At some point in our lives. She hugged me. And there was more warmth in that hug than 3 dozen, we're family but busy hugs. The next morning Judy called. Her voice was unaccustomedly uncertain. Mom, did you speak at the library? I did. Your stories. They were posted on the website. I read them. I hope I recognized myself. Pause. Is that what you think of me? No, Judy. Think of me. And you were just there for me in the story. She stopped talking. Can I come over? Just come over. No talking. I almost said yes. Almost. But then, Judy, I'm not inviting you anymore. The door's unlocked. But I'm not gonna keep it open. If you come in, you come in. Of your own free will. Not out of habit. The bell went off. And in that silence for the first time I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman who had made a choice. Speaking at the library gave me something my family hadn't given me in a long time. The feeling of being needed. Not like an ATM machine. Not as an advice machine. But as someone who is listened to not because you have to, but because you want to. In the evening came an email from one of the listeners. Thank you for writing this. I've been quiet about my mother for a long time. Now I want to call her. I printed it out and hung it on the refrigerator. Let it hang where the notes for the kids used to be. And that was my answer. I can still be kind. But I don't give for free anymore. A week later Thomas called. Usually he spoke quickly, as if with a tie around his neck. This time his voice was different. Mom, I thought we did everything right. Just kept it simple. Thomas, have you ever eaten turkey by yourself? No. I have. To a string quartet, by the way. He didn't say anything. We were selfish. All three of us. That word sounds better than children, I replied. More honest, at least. He offered to come over. With the kids. Without his wife. Just to visit. I didn't answer right away. I said, come if you're ready to listen. Not if you want to be forgiven. And there was silence again. Strange. Almost respectful. I went back to the nursing home. They already knew who I was. Not just a volunteer, but the one who writes and speaks aloud what's in everyone's chest. Mrs. Harvey and I had a literary evening. One of the men read his poems. I read my new story, about a woman who gave her children Christmas tree decorations, and they forgot why they kept them. After the reading, one of the nurses came over. Miss Mason, it's like you're speaking from my childhood. Maybe I'm just finally speaking, and I'm not afraid of it being awkward. That same day, I decided to take apart the attic. There were boxes of John's letters, drawings of the kids, love, mom cards, and dozens of tapes of voices from the past. I didn't throw them away, but I no longer dusted them off to justify someone else's current indifference. Because memory is what we choose to keep, not what we're held hostage by. I left only the light on in the attic, and quietly closed the door behind me. Spring was in full swing. I wore bright shawls and said good morning to my neighbors with a tone as if I had invented morning itself. I no longer needed to make excuses for loneliness. It wasn't a breakdown, it was a choice. And then, on one of those radiant days, a letter arrived. A handwritten one. From Judy. Mom, I don't know how to explain to you how much your words have cost me. Not because you were cruel, quite the opposite. Because for the first time you told me the truth I was afraid to hear. I don't visit because I don't know how to come back. I don't call because I'm afraid you won't pick up. But I remember you every time I look at my daughter. Because she needs to know what her grandmother was like. I read that letter 3 times. First with my eyes, then with my skin, and then with my heart. I didn't answer it right away. Because I didn't want to ruin this moment with a proper, I'm sorry. Sometimes you just have to let words live. I went out into the garden. I planted a rose. Not as a symbol, as an action. Because after all this, you don't want to talk about it, you want to grow it. And I thought, maybe one day Judy will see that rose. Maybe she'll think, well, Mom was still alive, even when she was forgotten. And if she doesn't, that's okay too. Because I finally planted it for me. Not for guests. Later, at the post office, I sent a letter to a woman from Chicago with whom we'd begun corresponding after the show. She wrote that her daughter hadn't spoken to her since 2019. We exchanged stories. Each had its own pains. But both letters smelled of hope. That's how page after page I realized, voice isn't something you're given. It's what you stop giving to those who don't listen. Over the summer, I started a quiet storytelling circle at the library. We meet once a week. People bring their sketches, notes, even clippings from old letters. I read aloud. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they laugh. But no one else feels unwanted. One evening I told the story of the woman who organized the dinner and got silence in return. And one young guy, who had obviously come by chance, said, I think you just described my grandmother. I'll probably give her a call. And that was it. I didn't win anything big. No award, no standing ovation. But if one grandmother gets a call, it means my story worked. I'm coming home. In the evening. With a flashlight in my bag and the feeling that I'm finally not walking alone, but with myself. I turn on the radio. There's a voice that sounds like mine. Or maybe it is me. I smile. Because now I know, even if you're alone, you can still be heard. And if someone still asks, what did she want with that Christmas dinner? Let them know. I wanted someone to come. Now I'm coming myself.